Hey guys, what is up? Kid here of Burn 1, bringing you another deck profile, this time on my personal favorite IMAS deck right now to be playing, which is Passion. Passion has a lot of really fun synergistic tools that let you keep hand size up and build crazy board states, and has some potential high rolls as well. The deck, though, doesn't feel super competitive because it does require you to hit some of the crazy board states in order to really pop off and beat some of the tier 1 decks, but this deck is a lot of fun, and I highly suggest you try the deck out if you bought into IMAS. But let's get right into that deck profile. Alright, so here is the deck itself. The idea of the deck is basically you're playing this huge value engine, and hopefully the value and pressure from that value, building up wide board states over and over again, will get you to the end game, as well as having some high roll potential depending on what you hit off of Mio Honda, which can create insane board states very early on in the game if your opponent is not careful to deal with your board. I'll get right into it, and then we'll kind of talk about the combos of the deck. So first card here is Kaori Ryuzaki. This is kind of just in there to recycle some of our passion stuff. It's also a good goblin card, essentially on turn 1. Dropping this on turn is always going to feel fine completely. And in the late game, like I said, we get a pay 2 at any point to go ahead and, you know, get back a passion card from our cemetery, because our cemetery will very quickly get up to 5 passion, meaning that in the later games, this card becomes an extra copy of any other card we might need, along with the fact that if we summon this card off of something or whatever, we have a chance to actually get another card off of it. Like I said, we're playing for a lot of value and like cycling cards over and over again, so this card just kind of fits in very nicely. You're not going to use the effect very often, but it's nice to have. Next, Yuzu Kitami is a great 1-drop 1/1 with Ward, which is the big part. The lesson effect doesn't really come up too often. Maybe if there's some reason you're gonna like swing in Kaori and then, you know, bounce it back to hand because it lives with 1 HP, that could be a potential play, but honestly it doesn't come up too often. We're mostly playing it as a 1/1 ward that we can play that also deals with our board, our opponent's board a little bit, and the fact that into the cool aggro matchup, a 1/1 ward makes it awkward for their turn 1 play to swing in, because it usually takes 1 damage if they high roll into the 3/2 that takes a damage to itself. It can trade favorably into that. The Evo itself is still ward, becomes a 2/2, which isn't that crazy of a thing, but the on evolve effect does let us bounce a cost 2 or lore on the enemy field and return it to their owner's hand, creating some awkward states for our opponent, especially if their 3/1 lives on the board, they only have 1 other card. We can Evo this to bounce the other cool thing, meaning that their card is going to like basically remove itself if they don't play out more stuff, things like that. It's just kind of in here for the favorable trade. It's a passion trait card as well, which is important, just to hit as many passions as possible. And so it's a solid 1-drop that you could be playing as well. And there's not a ton of ways to really ward up in this deck in the early stages, and we know how aggressive this current meta is going to be. It's either we run into the hyper aggro matchups, or we end up playing into Kuon, which is like, you know, the late game powerhouse of the format. Next, Mirai Akagi is in this list. This is kind of our consistency tool. This lets us go up in hand advantage. We get to play this down, and we Evo into the Evo side, which lets us discard a card, which is basically all our cards in our deck are passion, which means this is always on Evo, discard a card, draw 2. Helps us put things in the grave if we need to hurry up and get that 5 passion online or whatever. Though that's not the main thing going on here. The biggest thing we want here is the consistency of drawing 2 cards, and then obviously it lets us favorably trade into things on turn 2, seeing as the Evo cost is only 1, and if we're going second, this can Evo immediately, giving us not only hand advantage but also letting us trade early on. The fanfare lesson 1 with the pay 2 doesn't come up very often, but it can occasionally happen if you're planning to Evo and then trade into like a 4/4 or something like that. It does come up like in those very, very like niche scenarios, but you're basically never going to be using the lesson effect. Next, Natalia is 2-drop 1/3 with Storm, so we can get some nice damage in, but on top of that, it has a great fanfare effect, which is select an enemy fall on the field and deal it damage equal to the number of passion followers on your field. A lot of times into the aggro matchups, especially if we go first, we can drop a 1-drop. They will drop their 1-drop, and in response we play this, and this will usually pop their 1-drop and then letting us swing in for 1. It has 3 health, meaning it's kind of awkward to actually deal with, honestly, for your opponent. And a lot of times too, if this is the only card on the field when you do play it, it does still ping for 1, meaning that things that are left, you know, with 1 health hanging around, you can just pop those as well. It's just a very solid card into not only the cool matchup, but into any like relatively aggro matchup, especially since our board can go wide. And a lot of times when this does come down, you'll be pinging stuff for 2 to 4 damage. Next, we play a 1 of Angelic Maid. This is kind of like one of the few ways to heal, but also can create awkward board states for our opponent, where if we go ahead and, you know, pump one of our lower cost followers, suddenly the +3 health being incredibly huge for some of these followers, meaning they're going to be twice as hard to remove, because once we get our bodies up to, like, for example, like even a Mirai Akagi, if it goes up to a 3/5, that's still a lot of health to really deal with. So this not only helps some of our you know, early things stick if we do end up drawing it early, but we play it as a 1 of in here because we do only play 3 Center Street, which is an insane passion card to be playing. This is basically our Serpent's Wrath of the deck. That's what makes it so good. But the fact is that Angelic Maid also can be pulled off from another card, which is the Yui Otsuki. If needed to, we can evolve and pull that card out and literally power pump this if we need to, or something else. That's the big part about it. We just want to have extra targets, but just in case if we draw into most of our central streets, or if we don't need it to win the game. Next, Ako Takamori. This card is very, very solid. It's a really amazing going second card. So this comes into play. Look at top 3 cards of your deck. You may reveal a passion card among them and add it to your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So not only does this add consistency even on turn 3, even though we're left with this 2/2. If we have the Evo point, we do get an Evo into the Evo side, which we run 2 of here. And then on Evo, we could summon a passion flower that costs 3 or less from your hand. So a lot of times you can be summoning like Natalia here to go ahead and start doing damage to the board. So we have ways to interact with our board immediately. But then the big thing here is this kind of helps you find a card worth playing that's 3 or less. A lot of our other 3 or less cards that are worth playing here are Shino Sato, which we can talk about now. This is just kind of like a draw engine and a passion follower, but this is also a card your opponent has to respect a lot of times, especially once you discard some of your higher cost cards to the board, or to the grave, that is, because on the Evo side of the card, we have on evolve select the follower that costs 8 or less in your cemetery and summon it. So a lot of times this has fake ward unless your opponent has a way to immediately end the game for you. But sometimes this being left on board by mistake by your opponent, and we go into turn 5 with like an Evo point, we can Evo and suddenly bring out one of our heavy hitters, Akane Hino, which is insane, or even Mio Honda, which are all great cards to be summoning off of that effect. Or into the later game too, this Evo also gives us some extra push for our storm damage stuff. The next 3-drop card we play here is Yumi Aiba. If there are at least 3 passion flowers on your field, select an enemy flower on the field and deal it 2 damage. Once again, this is another way for our 3-drop Evo to go ahead and like interact with the board a bit, build a wide board there. But what's nice about this card too is that the Evo side has on evolve, you select the enemy follower with 3 defense or less on the field and put it to the bottom of its owner's deck. So this can not only 3-for-1 in some scenarios on turn 3, this also can like deal with followers that have 5 health, because we'll be able to deal 2 damage to it and then bottom deck it as well. So if there's anything annoying we have to get rid of, we can do that. Not only that, in like the cool matchup, for example, we can get rid of some of their tokens so they don't generate as much spell chain and stuff into their graveyard as much as possible. But it doesn't come up like too often that really matters too much, but it's just a nice option with the card. Yumi Aiba is really, really solid in this list. Like I said earlier, Center Street, this is basically our Serpent's Wrath. This card will just always be drawing you cards unless you're really, really losing the game, in which case suddenly you're not going to be able to draw a card because you have no passion flower on the board. But the card still does 5 damage for 3 as a quick speed. Insanely good card. This card actually turned out to be really, really busted because it forces our opponent to interact with our board early, because if we high roll very early on with this card, the game states get really, really obnoxious for our opponent. So if you rest 3 passion flowers on your field, you can summon a passion flower from your hand and give it at the start of your end phase, return this card to its owner's hand. So in theory, when you first look at this card, it's kind of like, wow, I have to kind of use 3 cards to first of all, I need to have 2 cards on the board before this card can even start activating itself, which is kind of annoying in some cases. What's really cool about this card is that it actually sets up some really weird scenarios where if your opponent doesn't respect your early game and you play this on 4 and pop off, the game can get out of control very quickly. So the idea here is we get to turn 4 and somehow 2 of our followers are on the board still. So this is the part of the deck that's kind of wonky, is that Turn 4 is very scary for your opponent because if they didn't remove a follower or follower or two by turn 4, because you can build decently wide boards early on with some of the 1 and 2 drops and even 3 drops on turn 3, like the one that summons another 3 drop, making it very awkward for your opponent to really handle that type of board. So if 2 things do live, you get to play this on 4, do the effect. The cards we are looking to hit with this card in our hand obviously is Mio Honda, because not only does Mio Honda immediately interact with the board, so we get to like remove something with Rush if they have anything rested or engaged, but what's nice about this card is we get the fanfare effect, and if the fanfare effect happens, what we're really looking forward here is possibly to hit Akahino or even Kirari here. Both insane hits off of Mio Honda. Obviously, hitting another Mio Honda 2 is pretty insane as well, though at that state, you kind of board locked yourself, so it's going to be really awkward. Not that great of a card to be hitting. But what's so great about this is that if we hit the high roll, we get to immediately storm 7, and this card is on the board stuck. What's really cool about this card too is that the fanfare lesson 3 does not require play points, which means we hit this, they have a wide board, they have to respect this card, because as soon as this comes in, we get to use lesson 3, discard 2 passion cards from our hand, deal 6 damage to the enemy board, so that generally clears everything all the time, and then we draw 2 cards, so we get to have some more consistency with Akane Hino by like filtering the bad cards out of our hand into our grave and so forth. But what's great too is if we do hit Kirari, it restands all our stuff, so that means the 2 things that did live that turn and we had to waste their swings to do the effect to summon the thing out, Kirari comes into the board, refreshes our followers. Now we have this 9/9 ward that our opponent has to get through, and our 2 smaller followers now get a swing in, and we've essentially protected our followers from being damaged that turn with their followers in a sense, because even if they get through our 9/9 ward or bounce it in some way, the crazy thing about that is we can choose, if need to, leave up any followers that we did rest that we couldn't swing in with like our 4-drop, for example. That way it's protected, so the next turn we can kind of try to pop off again unless they have a spell to remove it. Other than that, this card is kind of nutty too, because like you can do plays where if they leave you with a board state of like, and with like a 1-drop even on turn 6 on the board, if there's a 1-drop and like something else, you get to swing in for like 4 damage. This can come down, refresh them, and swing in for 4 more damage again, and now you have this 9/9 ward they have to respect on the board. And 9/9 is really big and really hard to deal with. The fact that this comes down and only costs 6 a lot of the times when we get a combo it with like a 1-drop that comes into play is really great too. A lot of times this will come out on turn 7 also if you need that 9/9 ward, because you can play a 1-drop and then they'll have to then you can play this right afterwards. There's just a lot of cool scenarios where Kirari it makes the deck that much more fun, and it'll find you random lethal lines too when your opponent thinks like, oh, they can only swing for 5, so I'm safe this turn, but it turns out you can swing for 10 because you have Kirari in your hand, or you summon it off of Mio Honda. It's a really fun card to be playing. Is this card like super competitive and really great in the deck? I'm not 100% sure. I've seen other lists not play this card, but this was one of the cards I was most excited about playing in this list and made me excited for Passion in general. Just this type of effect that gets to restand your followers essentially is an interesting effect to be playing with. Okay, I think I've said everything going on with this follower here, Aiko. This card surprisingly just can win games because your opponent disrespected your board and didn't realize the obsceneness of Passion once the board state starts getting crazy. Next, we got a Yui Otsuki. This card is very powerful because, one, we get a when it comes into play, we get to deal 4 damage somewhere to our opponent's board, which means this usually answers something on turn 4. It doesn't cost any extra other than eating a lesson, and it has a nice Evo too, like I was talking about earlier. The Evo side, which is great, you get to search your deck for a spell that costs 3 or less, or an amulet that costs 3 or less, and put into your EX area, and then shuffle your deck, and then it costs 3 less to play that turn, which means on Evo this becomes a 5/5, and not only does it ping something when it first comes into play, then you Evo, and then you get a center street, blow something out, and then draw a card. It's a really small, great package for the deck. It helps us deal with the board states that are really annoying. Card is amazingly great though. I already kind of talked about Mio Honda, but this card is insane. It makes the deck so much more fun. The RNG of this card is insane, and also the fact that if your opponent lets this live, they're just asking to lose the game if you have a couple lessons left in your EX zone, because with 2 lessons and 2 play points, you get to do this fanfare effect again, which is insane. And the fact that this card has Rush makes it obnoxiously powerful to be playing off of this 4-drop, which is why I like this deck so much, is that the synergistic thing of Aiko going along with Mio Honda, letting you interact with the board and still summoning extra cards afterwards feels great, which means your triple rest there that you did, the triple engage to do the effect, lets you at least stick with a follower on the board and you have the chance to hit something crazy off of it, like one of the 8 or 9 drops from that effect, which is like the great part of the card. Like I said, this is a card also, that has like a fake ward. This has to be answered immediately, because if it's not answered immediately, then this card can pop off again. And if you have 4 lessons in there for 4 play points and 4 lessons, you can do the effect 2 more times, building yourself crazy board state. And if that happens and you hit 2 of the Akane Hinos off of the top there and do 14 damage, that's on your opponent, plus the 5 from Mio Honda. Next, this is kind of our finisher and how we close out games, and this is another card that we take advantage of here, where we can trade some of our weaker followers in with the 4-cost Aiko here. Say a couple things live, we can trade that in, the triple engage, trade their attacks in to actually play the 7/7 Storm, blow up the board, deal 7 damage, then bounces back to our hand at the end of turn, which is a great way to just like control the board and put pressure on our opponent. This is our fake forte essentially. Card is insanely powerful. Once you start playing with it in the passion list, you'll love it a lot. It's just a really good board clear on top of consistency tool, because you get to draw more cards and filter the bad cards out of your hand. And then, like I said, Storm is just really busted. And then finally, Kirari Moroboshi is in here for like more of the high roll stuff. This card can be replaced. Like I said, I've seen lists play this and not play this. Personally, like the reason I was playing Passion was the insane stuff that this card can possibly do. And sometimes your opponent has to really think about, like, if I let this 1-drop live, they can play this Kirari for 6 next turn and like refresh all their followers and do some wacky stuff. I really like this card a lot, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's kind of the reason I built Passion, so I'm gonna include this card in the list no matter what. But yeah, that is the deck itself. The deck is insanely fun. It's obnoxious when the high rolls happen, and it's obnoxious when you just lose the game because things didn't work out. I really like this deck. It's a lot of fun. Is it a top tier deck? Probably not. Can it compete? Maybe. It just really depends on what you're hitting in your Swiss rounds, but this deck is a lot of fun. So if you're thinking of playing Passion, try it out when you go to your locals, and let me know how it goes. If you guys are building Passion, let me know in the comments what you have decided to build in Passion. I'm sure there's a lot of different type of builds running around. Personally, this has been my favorite so far. So let me know what you've been doing. Other than that, if you made it this far into the video, if you like these videos, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. It does help me a lot. It help the channel, helps me motivated to do more of this content and things like that. And hopefully I have some really fun content coming out for you pretty soon. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video. Later, everyone.